Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. Hope you're happy, healthy and well. It's time for a new book review today where I'm going to share some life lessons out of this book that you may have seen and also know of this author, given that she won the 2018 Nobel Prize for Literature. It's Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. Now, I'm already about 4 or 5 years too late in this. I checked some reviewers online who had been reviewing this book some years back, but I saw this book at the Monash University bookstore. One of the things I like doing is I like visiting different campuses around Melbourne. So we've got different universities. We've got Melbourne University, Monash University, we've got RMIT, we've got all sorts of different campuses all around tertiary education. One of the things I like to do is go and suss out their bookstores, because what they're selling in their bookstores are usually, more than likely, the books that they carry for their students doing English literature or any English studies. I saw this one, but obviously you can see I didn't buy it because I borrow all my books. I figured if this was in the university library bookstore, it must mean that those students of Monash University are doing this as some kind of study. I don't know that for sure. I haven't checked on Monash University English curriculum. So if there is a student out there, please let me know if this is the case, because I'd be interested to know also what other books that you're doing. I did take a picture while I was at the bookstore of the other books that are all quite eclectic, I must say. Over the next year, I will try and find and read these books and share those lessons. I was really glad that I read this one because I had seen it some years ago, but as you know, I take years before I read the books that are current for the year that they're published. Now, this was published in Poland many years ago, but it was only recently translated into English. It was published in 2009, but the translation by Antonia Lloyd-Jones was 2018. So I did see online that some of the English reviewers have been reviewing this book post 2018. Obviously, as I don't know Polish, I'm sure that the Polish reviewers out there would have been reviewing this book way earlier. Also have a deeper understanding as to some elements of this book. In particular, I wanted to understand this relationship between Poland and Czechoslovakia. So if there's any Polish viewers out there and any Czech viewers out there, please let me know what that link is, because I think I'm missing it as an Anglo-Saxon reader. We are introduced to Janina, but Janina really hates her name, and she is in her mid-60s and she's living up in the mountains. It's in winter time, and she's also someone who's been she's a little bit of an outcast in her village, considered, I guess you could say, the village kook. But she's someone who is very strong in her views, especially with regards to the state of the natural world and what modern man is doing to it. She's also very strong in her views around animal cruelty, and how she also believes that she would much rather be in the company of animals than the company of men and women. To her, humans are abhorrent. She doesn't understand them. The only people who make sense to her are either very young children who get to a certain age before they are indoctrinated by society and then they morph into, well, the rest of us. Also, animals. Animals to her convey the purity and the simplicity of life and how natural life should be. Now, in her world, she also has some friends, and she's got a friend called Dizzy who is also someone who is translating the words of Blake, the English poet, into Polish, and they spend a lot of time there trying to translate the English words into some kind of equivalent. She also comes across a scientist who stays with her for a while, who's also interested in the natural world. This book ultimately it's a murder mystery plus a conversation about why we exist as humans. There's also animal cruelty, themes of the natural world and the animal world and how there's conflict between them. There's also Janina trying to understand where she fits in the world and trying to make sense of the world. And she does so in her own spiritual way, given that she is an astrologer and she's very much into birth charts, and she's also created her death chart, she called it, where she knows exactly what will happen, and she sees symbols in everyday life, in the bird life, in the life that is around her, in the forest, in the natural world. She comes up with her own assumptions with regards to what is happening in her world. Sorry, I'm looking outside because the bird life is going crazy around here, and it's actually quite nice to see so many different birds that I have not seen in this area in the one time. And I've also put up bird baths and seeds for them to come, and so it's been amazing, which is really weird I said that because of what I'm sharing here today. Anyway, going back to the story. So she's an astrologer, she's in this village, it is winter time, and she's the caretaker. I know some people in parts of different countries around the world where villages are empty during winter because their inhabitants are actually in their homes in the cities. But Janina stays back over winter and she takes care of those homes in preparation for their owners to come over in summer to start life back up again. Now, Janina is a really interesting character, and as I read this book, there are elements of this book that I thought to myself, I'm not understanding, I need to understand. But there are also realizations of this book of another book that I had read, and also the character of Janina reminded me of this other book, and I'm going to talk about that. Now, I mentioned that she has some very strong views. What happens in this village is there are a series of murders, and those murders were all, I guess when you read the book, you seem to think that they all had it coming. Well, she seems to think that they all had it coming because she saw it in their birth charts. She managed to get their date of birth, their year of birth, and was able to draw up their natal chart to then look at the astrology and their horoscopes to determine how and why they would have died. And she makes these assumptions that it is the natural world coming back for them. The animals are taking revenge on modern man. And it's really an interesting concept because it made me think of a time here in Australia when we had the great fires and also floods as well, which I'm sure that we're going to see more of. We saw images on our evening news of animals in our backyards, in our front yards, and a particular image where there was abundant kangaroos in a front yard because they were trying to escape the fires that we were going through. We're seeing a lot more animals obviously coming into our world simply because of their natural world being destroyed. And I did wonder whether this was an element of what Olga was writing about here, the fact that the animal world is now somehow taking revenge onto the modern world because we've simply destroyed their natural habitats, that they are coming back for us in some way. Now, in this book, they're creating murder, or are they? She was trying to grapple with her understanding of why these murders are happening. As we're reading, as a reader, I must admit, I started initially thinking about Janina and thinking, yeah, she's got, she's right. She's absolutely right about this. But on the other hand, something about her just didn't sit well with me. And I think it was her belligerence or her assurity that she knew better, that everything was predestined, that it was written in the stars, it was written in the horoscope, and that she had the answer. And I think that didn't sit well with me, even though initially I started to really feel for her, and at times I would think to myself, yeah, I'm considered the kook. I'm like her. I really understand what she's about. But then there are times where the things would go a bit too far-fetched or a bit past reality, where she thought that the animals caused this murder of the people. That didn't sit well with me because I For me, I don't think animals can think like humans do. I don't think that they are that way inclined, if that makes sense. I don't think that revenge could be something of an animal trait. I liked how she has these views of the world, and in one particular, on page 40, she said that she could live in everlasting dusk. And I guess that took to mean of living in a world that is not fully one way or the other. It's in a liminal world. And maybe Olga is saying to us that we have to get used to living in this liminal world of not being one or the other. And certainly this time and place of the world where it's at, I like to think that I don't want to be in the space of that one or the other, that I, like her, am living in this liminal space and trying to make sense of it, waiting to see what would transpire. She said that the world is divided in three, and I had to be amused by this. She said the first are the skiers. The skiers are the hedonists, the ones who get carried down by the slopes, and I guess we could see all that in some people. The next is the drivers. Drivers take fate in their own hands. And then the third that she puts herself in is the allergy sufferers. They're always at war with themselves. And she also believes it is the sick people, the unhealthy people, who are truly the healthiest, because they can see life for what it is. And I had to look at that. I'm thinking, am I a skier? Definitely not a skier. Am I a driver who take fate in their own hands? Or am I an allergy sufferer? Oh, it's a tough one. So I had to laugh about that one. One of the other life lessons out of this is that, and I found it really amusing because it was a conversation I had with someone fairly recently about writers, and we were having this conversation about who writers truly are. I must admit, there was a part of me in the last year that I have been writing quite a lot, but I've been writing more reflective, introspective, journalistic type of writing, which I don't share with the world. This is simply my own writing. This year, I did take to writing a lot more creatively and thinking, what if I changed my writing style to write more fiction? Over the last few months, I've come to realize that I've been struggling with writing like that. I much prefer to write in a more reflective, introspective approach, a more insular approach where my own true feelings actually come out on the page. Writers, in this conversation, the other person said that writers don't take that view. Writers simply are living in their own world, and they're looking out at the world, thinking of a fictionalized world that they could create a story. And I thought to myself, yeah, that could be the case for some writers. Some writers possibly look out to people and make up some stories in their head, and then they go down and they write it. But in this book on page 48, she says, Olga, I don't know if it's Olga's view, who is the writer, or if I don't know if it's really Janina, the protagonist's view in this story, that writers are fakes. Writers are constant observers of the world. I had to think about that one because it actually reflected what this other person was saying, that writers, fictionalized writers, are truly fakes because they're not really thinking, they're not taking introspective views of their own world, but they're actually forming a story based on what they're seeing. So I thought that was a very interesting life lesson. My life lesson here for me was, do I think as writers as fakes? No, I simply think that they are crafting their own world and creating their own story on paper for others to read, and then for others to really take some meaning, whatever meaning that is, and context in their lives, to create some meaning out of it. I've started to really form this idea in my head in recent times that I'm not really a writer. I don't do the fictionalized writing so well as I do my insular writing, my reflective journalistic writing. I'm more of a reader. So I started to think that maybe in this world there are writers who have to express themselves in fictionalized format out there, and then there are readers who read that and then can derive some own meaning. On page 54, she writes, the world has dropped its petals, and sometimes I feel that way. In some way, seeing where what has happened last month or so with the world leading up to the US elections and the election happening, the world has dropped its petals, but I'd like to think that out of that comes growth. Out of that comes a new flower, a new rose that blooms, and hopefully something good will come over in time. Maybe drive your plow of the bones of the dead means something about, what we do is we're starting afresh, we're plowing the earth, we're making something grow and build and become better. The world really needs to be a better place. I found the character in this book a little bit grating at times, simply because some of her ideas had gone a little bit far-fetched, that the hand had switched over to the other side. It had become a bit too illogical and nonsensical. In some way, she also writes that on page 77 that mankind is not governed by rules of reason, stupid and strict, but by the heart and intuition. And somehow part of me feels that she hadn't evolved in some way. She hadn't evolved to the point. She'd gotten too crazy. On page 81 also, she says that she hates people who have cold irony and who belittle everything. And if they can't understand it, they ask you for details. You share their details and then they can't explain it. And I think somehow, we're finding people like this in this world. But I'm finding her belligerence and her behaviour also doesn't help in the informing and understanding of the other as well. This book reminds me of Herman Hesse's Steppenwolf. And I would say Janina is the female version of Steppenwolf. These two books actually remind me a lot about each other, especially her behaviour. It's how she approaches other people, how she thinks herself as better than other people, how she gets angry with other people when they don't understand. Also, she's pushing her own agenda, in which case here it is astrology, and also this idea that Czechoslovakia holds a promise of freedom. And that's the part I don't understand, and I think I need someone who is of that background to actually explain it to me. In this book, I found that you can't get rid of evil or badness. I think it's something that we just have to learn to live with this world and learn to live in the liminal space. And I don't think Janina was able to live in that liminal space. She had to make sense in her own world of something that she believes is better. I would say, hey, she could go into Czechoslovakia or she could go into the other world and actually find that it's not like how she thought about it in the end. Which makes me think of the alignment of how people are very black and white nowadays. The reds and the blues and the blacks and the whites, and you think, well, one or the other isn't correct. And I think ultimately it's this middle ground, this collective space, which is going to be the future, which is going to be the space that we need to be playing and learning and understanding more from each other and with each other. I think that space is going to be the space of understanding of where to go to in the future. One of the other things I didn't like about this book was how some of the nouns were in capital letters. It made for a less flowing type of reading. So it reminded me that, sometimes if you think that you're changing the world by creating new rules for the world, therefore sometimes it might explode back in your face. And I didn't like the fact that she didn't take time to learn the people's names. She actually created names for themselves and descriptions of themselves. And that in itself, for me, really sit well with me. Because if she was truly compassionate, if she was truly someone who wanted to learn from someone else, you wouldn't create these descriptors for them. You would actually learn their name and understand their name, call them by their name. Anyway, that is only my view. And these capitalized words also, at times I felt that she was pushing her own agenda, that it didn't really need to have these capitalized words. I think what she was trying to say was she was pushing her own philosophy on us, the readers. Again, writers can do whatever they want. Don't get me wrong. They can say ultimately writers present something that makes us think about the world. But it's something that, for me, when they're changing something about the written rules, they're obviously making a statement. We interpret that statement in that own way. And I come from my own beliefs, I guess, is if you're doing that, that you are making us think of something else. Maybe you are making us think differently, which is a good thing. Ultimately, we decide whether we believe it or not. For me, I've just found the capitalization of letters difficult. It's just coming from a place that you cannot fight one viewpoint with another strong viewpoint. I think that fighting actually comes from understanding and compassion and empathy and listening, but not creating additional rules in your own head about how people are and what they should be doing or how they should be acting. That is my life lessons out of Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. I would highly recommend that you watch Steppenwolf. In fact, okay, I did the review on Steppenwolf. I would just say read the book. Herman Hesse, Steppenwolf is one of the classic books that you should read. And then I would say read this book as well. See whether you can make some alignments out of it. Also, let me know if there are any other books who have similar philosophies out of Steppenwolf and this one. If you are a Monash student and you are studying and this, I'm assuming this is a book in your curriculum, please let me know if that is the case and what you thought about it. That is all I have to say about this book. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.